Authorized police records. Factual video evidence. Raw enforcement. This is bodycam incident reports.
Step away from the house, now! Hands where I can see them!
Sergeant, I'm the homeowner. My ID and deed are on that table right there.
I'm not reading papers! Turn around! On the ground!
Do not touch me. Verify the documents before you ruin your career.
Marcus Thorne didn't look up as the woman stormed back toward her own manic with a perfectly coiffed bob, and a gripping fear of anything that disrupted her curated view of the world was clutching her phone like a weapon. "Good morning," Marcus said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that usually lured lawn phone already pressed to her ear. He just kept working the soil, his hands gloved a pair of rusted commanded silences in briefing rooms. "Can I help you with something?" "Don't you play games with me," Shears resting on the stone retaining wall next to him. He was 58 years old, a man who had spent Brenda snapped, stepping closer to the bars of the gate but staying safely on the sidewalk. "I've been decades in uniform, jumping out of transport planes and commanding battalions in places most people only saw on the evening news. He had retired, watching you for 20 minutes, digging holes, walking around the back, checking the windows. I know what you're doing 2 months ago with a pension, a Purple Heart, and a desire for silence." He had purchased the sprawling estate at. "This house has been empty for 6 months, and I know the owners aren't due to move in until next week. So 4102 Whispering Pines Lane, precisely because it promised solitude. It was the kind of neighborhood where the drive you need to grab your tools and leave before I have you arrested for trespassing." Marcus looked down at his attire. Ways were long, the fences were high, and the residents valued privacy above all else. Or so he thought. He was wearing a faded gray t-shirt that hugged his broad shoulders, stained cargo pants, and heavy work boots. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his wrist. He was wearing a faded gray t-shirt, stained, held a trowel in one hand. To Brenda, he didn't look like the owner of a $4 million with mulch-loose cargo shorts and old combat boots that had seen the dust of Iraq and Afghanistan. He didn't look estate. He looked like labor. And in Brenda's mind, labor didn't work unsupervised on Saturdays, and they liked the typical resident of Whispering Pines. He didn't look like the doctors, the tech CEOs, or the old, certainly didn't look at her with such calm, unwavering authority. "Ma'am, I bought this house money heirs who drove their Teslas and Mercedes sedans down the tree-lined streets." He looked like a man working. Marcus said, his tone polite but firm. "I closed on the property 3 days ago. I'm just doing." And to Brenda Miller, the self-appointed guardian of the neighborhood watch who lived 3 houses down, a black man working some work on the hydrangeas before the movers bring the furniture on Monday. "My name is Marcus Thorne." "Liar," Brenda spat back instantly, her face flushing a deep, indignant pink. "I know the realtor. She told me on the property of the empty Van der Hoven estate could only mean one thing, trouble." Brenda had been watching him for 20 minutes from her kitchen window. She'd seen him pull up in a Ford F-15. Retired executive bought this place. She didn't say anything about. She trailed off her eyes, scanning him up and down with Undis Zero, not a luxury car, and start digging up the flower beds near the main gate. She didn't see aghast disgust. "You are not an executive. You're a squatter or a scrapper trying to steal copper homeowner improving his investment." She saw a scrapper stealing copper piping or a squatter trying to establish residency or simply piping. "I'm not stupid. You need to leave. Now." Marcus sighed. He had dealt with insurgents, someone who didn't belong. When she dialed 911, her voice wasn't fearful. It was indignant diplomatic crises and high-stakes negotiations. He had the patience of a saint, but the morning sun was getting. She was a woman who believed she had a divine right to curate her surroundings, and Marcus Thorne was a smudge on her perfect canvas. 911, what is your emergency? Yes, I need an officer at Hot, and he just wanted to finish his gardening. I'm not leaving my own home, ma'am. If 4102 Whispering Pines Lane immediately. There is a man trespassing on the property. He's digging up the yard. You're concerned, you're welcome to check the mailbox. My name is on the new label. and he became aggressive when I asked him to leave. Is he armed, ma'am? Brenda hesitated. I am not walking onto that property with a violent man. Brenda shrieked, backing away as if he had brandished a looking through her blinds at the gardening shears sitting on the wall. He has some kind of blade, a large knife or machete. He's waving it around. I'm afraid for my safety. Knife instead of a garden trowel. She fumbled with her phone, her fingers trembling with a mix of adrenaline and self-righteous fury. That's it. I'm calling 911. You had your chance. Your going to was a lie, and she knew it. But Brenda Miller knew how the system worked. If she said gardener, they would send a patrol car in an hour. If she said weapon, they would send the cavalry in 5 minutes. She jail. Marcus watched her dial, shaking his head slightly. He turned his back on her, kneeling down to return to hung up the phone with a satisfied click, crossed her arms, and waited for the sirens. She wanted a show. She wanted his hydrangeas. He knew the protocol. He knew what was coming. But he also knew the law, and he knew exactly the neighborhood to see that she was vigilant. She had no idea that she had just set in motion a chain of events that would bankrupt who he was. He just hoped the officers they sent had more sense than his new neighbor. Sergeant Kyle Vance was 34 years. The call and the sergeant. The call that came into the dispatch center was hysterical, fragmented, and dangerous. 911, old and hungry. He had made sergeant 2 years ago, not because he was a brilliant investigator, but because his arrest. What is your emergency? I need police immediately at 440 Oakwood Drive. There is a man, numbers were staggering. Vance was a stats guy. He believed that policing was a numbers game. More stops meant more warrants. A large black man, he's tearing up the yard. He's trying to break into the house. I think more warrants meant more arrests, and more arrests meant promotions. He was built like a linebacker, thick-necked and aggressive with, he has a weapon, he's screaming at me, he's threatening me, please hurry. The dispatcher, a high and tight haircut that he thought made him look military, though he had never served a day in the armed typed rapidly flagging the call as a priority 1 burglary in progress, potential threat to life. Ma forces. Vance was patrolling the perimeter of the district when the call came over the radio. Priority 1. Trespassing in him, are you safe? Is he approaching you? He's staring at me right progress. Suspect armed with a bladed weapon. Aggressive. His eyes lit up. Whispering Pines was now... Brenda lied, her voice breathless as she watched Marcus calmly patting down soil around a root ball 30 feet away. High-value zone. The residents there had deep pockets and political connections. Solving a problem there was a good looks crazy. He's going to break a window. Send someone now. Sergeant Kyle Vance was cruising 3-way to get a commendation letter in his file. He flipped on his lights and sirens, gunning the engine of his intercept miles away when the call flashed across his terminal. Vance was 34 years old, a 10-year veteran 04. He didn't check the property records. He didn't wait for backup. He had a narrative in the force who had recently been promoted to sergeant, not because of his community policing skills, but because his aggressive arrest numbers had before he even turned the steering wheel of vagrant, probably on drugs, terrorizing a nice lady in a nice neighborhood. Looked good on paper during the mayor's tough-on-crime initiative. Vance was built like a linebacker who... Before we continue, where are you watching from? If you believe that homeowners should be safe from harassment in their own, had let himself go slightly, relying on the bulk of his vest and the authority of his badge to command respect. He rarely driveways. Please, hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us tell the stories that the mainstream media often ignores. Marcus earned. He had a history. 6 complaints in the last 3 years. 4 for excessive force, 2 for verbal heard the siren before he saw the car. It was a sound he was used to, though usually it was followed abuse. all of them dismissed or unsubstantiated by a review board that preferred to sweep problems under the rug by mortar fire or the chop of a medevac helicopter. He paused, leaning on his shovel, and took a sip rather than address the rot. Vance believed in a simple version of policing. There are wolves and there are sheepdogs. Of iced tea from the pitcher he'd set on the porch railing. He checked his watch. 10:15 a.m. He had expected a delivery truck with his new furniture, not the police. The cruiser screeched too. He considered himself a sheepdog, but his definition of a wolf was anyone who didn't immediately bow to his authority. A halt right in front of his driveway, blocking the entrance. It was an aggressive move designed to intimidate. Sergeant Vance kicked, "Dispatch 4-David-2, show me en route to Oakwood." Vance said into his radio, flipping his door open, and stepped out, his hand already resting on the grip of his service pistol. He didn't walk on his lights and sirens. The engine of his cruiser roared as he floored the accelerator. He loved this part. The rush, the power, the anticipation of the takedown. In his mind, the narrative was already written. He stalked. He scanned the scene and saw exactly what he expected to see. A large black man in dirty Oakwood Drive was the wealthiest street in the precinct. The residents were doctors, lawyers, and tech CEOs. They didn't clothes holding a shovel standing in the yard of a mansion that was currently listed as sold on the real estate apps have large black men gardening in their front yards unless they were paid help and paid help didn't, but surely not to a guy like this. "Drop the weapon. Now!" Vance shouted, his voice booming across scream and threaten. Neighbors. This was a vagrant, Vance decided. A drifter on drugs, maybe of the quiet cul-de-sac. Marcus blinked. He looked at the shovel in his hand, then gently set it down on the grass. He didn't raise his hands, but he kept them visible away from his waist, mental case wandering in from the city. He's threatening a female caller, Vance muttered to himself, gripping. He stood with the posture of a man who had stared down warlords and generals, relaxed, balanced completely under the steering wheel. Not on my watch. He checked the computer screen. Subject black male 50s, heavy build. Weapons possible. Vance didn't wait for backup. He didn't wait for aid. "Good morning, officer," Marcus said, his voice a low baritone that carried without shouting. "I, for the 2nd unit, which was still 5 minutes out. He wanted the collar. He wanted to be the hero who saved the rich. Assume the neighbor called you. I said step away from the weapon." Vance advanced up the driveway, unholstering his tea lady from the violent intruder. He turned the corner onto Oakwood Drive, his tires screeching slightly on the pristine asphalt. Heezer. "Get on the ground. Face down. Hands behind your back." "I'm not getting on the ground." Saw the house a sprawling colonial estate set back from the road behind a high iron fence. He saw the woman Brenda Marcus said calmly, "I own this property. My identification is on the table right there along with the deed of standing by the curb frantically waving him down." And he saw the suspect, a man in dirty clothes kneeling in sail. "I'm doing some landscaping." "I don't care what you think you're doing. The dirt digging." Vance slammed the cruiser into park right in front of the driveway, blocking the exit. "He didn't give you a lawful order." Vance was inside the gate now, closing the distance. He was running on adrenaline and confirmation to assess the situation. He didn't notice the lack of forced entry points. He didn't see the calm bias. In his mind, homeowners in Whispering Pines didn't wear torn cargo shorts. They didn't sweat demeanor of the man. He saw a target. He unbuckled his seatbelt, kicked the door open, and they certainly didn't look like Marcus Thorne. "Officer, you need to slow down," Marcus said, stepped out, his hand already resting on the grip of his service weapon. "Do you think officers who rush into—" He didn't move. He didn't flinch. "My name is Marcus Thorne. I am a situations without assessment should be held personally liable. Let me know in the comments." Vance walked past Brenda without a word, his eyes locked on Marcus. He didn't ask her what happened. He didn't need to. He knew what he retired Colonel United States Air Force. I purchased this home on Tuesday. If you check the county database, or if you just look at the paperwork sitting 10 feet away from you, we can resolve this. I'm not here to read was seeing, an intruder, a threat, a criminal. Marcus heard the siren cut off abruptly and the heavy slam of a car door. He didn't look up immediately. He finished paperwork. I'm here to secure the scene, Vance yelled. He was close enough now to grab Marcus. You patting the soil around the base of the white hydrangea wiped his hands on a rag he kept in his back pocket, and then are trespassing on private property and you are resisting a peace officer. Turn around now or you're getting tased. This slowly stood. He picked up his glass of lemonade from the porch step and took a sip, turning to face the officer. Is the moment where training and temperament collide. A seasoned officer, one interested in the truth, would have paused. They would have looked at the pristine patio furniture, the pitcher of iced tea, the calm demeanor of the man. They would have asked a striding up his driveway. Sergeant Vance was moving fast, his body language screaming aggression. He bypassed the intercom question. But Sergeant Vance wasn't interested in questions. He was interested in compliance. He felt his authority being challenged by at the gate pushing through the unlocked pedestrian entrance without pausing. He marched onto the property, chest puffed out hand, hovering a man who should have been afraid of him, and that made him dangerous. Marcus looked at the taser, then at Vance near his holster. Police, step away from the house. Let me see your hands. Vance barked, his voice echoing Zai's. He saw the glaze of ego, the inability to process information that contradicted his worldview. Marcus had trained off the brick facade of the mansion. Marcus stood his ground on the patio about 20 feet from where Vance had young soldiers like this boys with too much power and not enough wisdom. He knew that any sudden movement would result in electricity stopped. He didn't raise his hands in surrender. He wasn't a criminal. Instead, he held the coursing through his body. I am complying with your investigation, Marcus said, keeping his hands open. But lemonade glass in his left hand and kept his right hand open and visible at his side. Good morning, Sergeant. I am not getting in the dirt in my own front yard. I have back injuries from my service. I cannot lie prone, Marcus said, his voice level and calm. I am the property owner. My identification is on the table right here. I am happy to stand here while you verify my identity. Last warning. Vance raised the taser. He gestured with a nod toward a patio table 5 feet away, where his wallet housed keys and a... From the window across the street, Brenda Miller watched with a tight, satisfied smile. This was what she wanted. Order restored folder containing the closing documents sat in plain view. I didn't ask for your life story, I said. The intruder was being put in his place. She didn't see a man standing his ground. Let me see your hands. Put the glass down. Now, Vance screamed, closing the distance. He was fueled by adrenaline and she saw a criminal being caught. Officer, Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming the command voice he had used to brief generals. You are making a mistake that you cannot undo. Look at the table. Look at the absolute certainty that he was in charge. The lack of immediate submission from the suspect irritated him. People were supposed to see keys. Vance holstered the taser and lunged. He wasn't going to shoot. He was going tower. They were supposed to be afraid. This man looked bored. I'm complying with your request, Dominate. He grabbed Marcus's left wrist and twisted it behind his back using a leverage hold designed to inflict pain and to see my hands. Sergeant, Marcus said, placing the glass slowly on the railing, but you need to lower your force compliance. Marcus could have stopped him. He knew 14 different ways to disable a man of Vance's size voice. You are trespassing on private property without a warrant or probable cause. Probable cause, I got a call about A in under 3 seconds. His muscle memory screamed at him to sweep the officer's leg to drive an elbow into the exposed burglary in progress. Vance spat, stepping up onto the patio. He was close now, uncomfortably close, invading Marcus's ribs. But Marcus Thorne was disciplined. He knew that if he fought back, even in self-defense, the narrative would shift personal space. You don't live here. Look at you. You're a vagrant. Now get. He would be the violent suspect who attacked a cop. He had to be perfect. He had to be on the ground before I put you there. Marcus looked the sergeant in the eye. He saw the dilated pupils, the sweat, the statue that the storm broke against. He let his arm be twisted. He winced as his rotator cuff on the upper lip, the trembling hand near the taser. He recognized the signs of a man who had lost control of his, reconstructed after an IED blast in 2009, screamed in protest. I am not resisting Sasana emotions, a dangerous trait in a soldier and a fatal one in a police officer. Sergeant, look, Marcus said loudly, speaking not just to Vance but to the Ring doorbell camera mounted on the brick pillar 5 feet away. At the table, Marcus said, speaking slowly and clearly as if to a child. Those are the keys to the I am submitting to this arrest under protest. You are hurting a disabled veteran on his own property. Shut up, front door. That is the deed to the house. My ID is right there. I am Colonel Marcus Thorne, USAF. Stop fighting. Vance screamed, panting, though Marcus hadn't moved an inch. Vance kicked Marcus's legs apart. Retired. If you touch me, you are making a career-ending mistake. Vance didn't look at forcing him to bend over the hood of the patrol car. He slapped the cuffs on too tight, the metal biting the table. He didn't look at the keys. His brain had filtered out everything that contradicted his narrative, all into the ulnar nerve. You're under arrest for trespassing, disorderly conduct, and resisting arrest. Vance spat he heard was a challenge. Colonel, yeah, right. This guy was lying. This guy was mocking him. Leaning close to Marcus's ear. You picked the wrong house to squat in, buddy. Check last warning, Vance yelled, reaching for his handcuffs. Turn around, hands behind your back. I am not my pocket, Marcus whispered, the pain in his shoulder radiating down his spine. My wallet, my ID. Turning around, Marcus said, planting his feet. I have identified myself. I have offered proof of residence. Will check it at the station. Vance patted him down, roughly pulling out the wallet but not opening it. He committed no crime. You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights. Vance snapped. The mention of rights, the calm defiance, tossed it onto the dashboard of the cruiser. He didn't want to see the ID. He didn't want the refusal to play the role of the scared suspect. It was too much. That's it. You're under no. If he looked now and saw the address matching the ID, he would have to admit he was wrong. And arrest for trespassing and resisting an officer. Vance lunged forward. Grabbing Sergeant Vance did not admit he was wrong. By now, other neighbors had come out. A man walking a golden retriever stopped and Marcus's right arm with a force that was intended to spin him around and throw him off balance. It was a move designed stared. A woman in a jogging suit pulled out her phone. Is everything okay? The jogger called out to assert dominance, to physically subdue a non-compliant subject. But Marcus Thorne had spent 30 years in the military. Police business, ma'am, back up! Vance shouted, waving his hand dismissively. He shoved had been trained in hand-to-hand combat by some of the most lethal operators on the planet. His muscle memory activated Marcus into the back of the cruiser. The space was cramped, the hard plastic seat unforgiving against Marcus's injured back. As the door slammed shut, sealing him inside the cage, Marcus looked out the window. He saw Brenda Miller standing instantly. As Vance grabbed him, Marcus could have easily redirected the sergeant's momentum, locked his joint, and put on her porch arms crossed, watching the show. He locked eyes with her. He didn't glare. He didn't him face down in the hydrangeas in less than 2 seconds. He didn't. Marcus knew that look angry. He looked disappointed. Vance climbed into the driver's seat. Adrenaline fading, replaced by the if he fought back, even in self-defense, even on his own property, the narrative would shift instantly. Smug satisfaction of a good bust. He radioed dispatch. Suspect in custody. One male uncooperative. Transport. Violent suspect attacks officer. He would be shot or tased, and the truth would be buried undering to precinct. Copy that, Sergeant. Did you verify the homeowner status? The caller said he claimed to a police report filled with lies. Discipline was his weapon now. Marcus kept his muscles loose but firm. He allowed Vance to pull his arm, but he didn't stumble. He didn't flinch. I am not live there. Vance hesitated for a split second. Suspect had no proof of residency. Claimed he resisting. Marcus stated loudly, his voice projecting toward the street where Brenda and now 2 other neighbors were watching. I bought the place. Likely story. I've got him for resisting regardless. Do you think officers should be personally complying under duress? This officer is assaulting me on my own property. Shut up. Vance grunted, struggling to liable for damages when they ignore evidence at the scene. Drop your opinion in the comments below. The drive to the station wrenched Marcus's other arm behind his back. Marcus was strong, solid granite compared to the suspects Vance usually bullied. Vance was 10 minutes of silence. Vance tried to turn up the radio blasting talk radio to drown out the quiet, but they had to use both hands to force Marcus's wrists together. He fumbled for his handcuffs, snapping them on with vindictive tightness. The metal bit into Marcus's skin, pinching the nerve. Marcus winced but remained silent. He stood silence from the back seat was heavy. Usually, suspects pleaded. They cursed. They kicked the door. They cried. Marcus Thorne did none of that. He sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the back of Vance's head, memorizing tall shoulders back, even as Vance shoved him toward the stairs. You think you're smart, huh? The badge number reflected in the rear-view mirror, 4922. Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep. Vance breathed heavily, pushing Marcus down the walkway. Talking about rights. You have the right to shut your mouth. Breath. He was running through the checklist. Secure counsel. Request medical evaluation for the shoulder. Request body cam footage preservation. Trespassing. Loitering. Disturbing the peace. Resisting arrest. I'm going to stack so many charges on you. He wasn't a victim. He was an operator in a hostile environment, and he was gathering intel. They arrived at You Won't See Daylight for a month. Officer, Marcus said calmly. There are security cameras on the precinct. Vance pulled into the sally port, the garage door rattling shut behind them. He hauled Marcus out of the car. The porch. You ignored the evidence on the table. You ignored my identification. You are being recorded. Vance laughed. The pain in Marcus's shoulder was a dull, throbbing fire now, but he refused to limp. He walked upright, matching. It was a harsh, ugly sound. Cameras? I don't care about your fake cameras. And I don't Vance's pace. Inside, the booking area was busy. Phones were ringing, officers were typing reports. But care about your fake ID, you're done. They reached the gate. Brenda was still standing there looking. The noise seemed to dip as Vance marched Marcus in. The desk sergeant was a man named Elias Cobb. He was slightly less triumphant and slightly more confused. She had expected the police to chase him off, maybe yell at him. She hadn't 55 a grandfather, and he had been working the desk for 12 years. He knew every frequent flyer, every drug expected to see a man being marched out in handcuffs who looked so dignified. Is he safe now, dealer? Every troublemaker in the city. He didn't know the man in the handcuffs, but he knew Brenda asked, her voice wavering. He's in custody, ma'am, Vance said, puffing out types. And the man standing in front of him didn't look like a trespasser. He looked like authority. What do we have, Vance? Cobb asked, peering over his reading glasses. Trespassing at his chest. Won't be bothering you anymore. We're taking him downtown. I live here, Brenda. Old Vanderhoven place. Neighbor called it in. Guy was digging up the yard, refused to leave. Resisted, Marcus said, looking directly at her. His eyes were cold, filled with a disappointment that cut deeper than anger. And arrest. Cobb looked at Marcus. He saw the expensive combat boots, not the surplus store kind, but the "when I come back, we are going to have a very long conversation about this." "Get in the car." Vance custom-fitted kind. He saw the scars on the forearms. He saw the bearing. "Sir." Cobb shoved Marcus's head down, forcing him into the cramped back seat of the cruiser. He slammed the door. Sealing Marcus said to Marcus, "Name?" "Colonel Marcus Thorne, U.S.A.F. retired," Marcus said. His voice was calm inside the cage. Vance walked around to the driver's seat, adrenaline still pumping. He felt good. He felt powerful, but it carried a weight that made a rookie officer at the water cooler turn around. "I reside at 41. He had neutralized the threat. He had protected the neighborhood. He checked his rearview mirror as he peeled away from the curb. 02 Whispering Pines Lane. I was arrested while gardening in my own front yard." Cobb's eyebrows. The suspect was sitting perfectly still, staring out the window, looking less like a criminal and more like a general surveying a shot up. He looked at Vance. "Kyle, did you check his ID?" "He didn't have it on him," Vance lied. He was belligerent. "My wallet is in the sergeant's car. Battlefield." It unnerved Vance for a split second, but he pushed the feeling away. He was the law. And Marcus corrected. "On the dashboard, along with my house keys, which he refused to let me use to prove my residency, the law was never wrong. The drive to the 4th Precinct took." Vance rolled his eyes. "Sarge, don't let him spin you. He's a SCU 20 minutes. For most of the ride, Sergeant Vance filled the silence with a lecture designed to justify his actions to himself as satyr. Probably stole the boots." Cobb stood up slowly. He didn't like Vance. He didn't much as to the prisoner. "You people think you can just walk into these neighborhoods and do whatever you want," and like his attitude, and he didn't like the way he treated people. "Go get the wallet, Vance," Vance said, eyeing Marcus in the rearview mirror. "Acting like you own the place. Scaring decent people. I need to process him first. Go get the wallet." Cobb's voice wasn't lucky I didn't tase you. "Next time you see a badge, you hit the dirt. You understand me at a request." Vance huffed, turned around, and stomped back toward the garage, while Marcus didn't respond to the bait. He sat awkwardly, his hands numb from the tight cuffs his was gone. Cobb looked at Marcus. "Colonel, you serve in the Gulf. Desert Storm, Bosnia, Iraq, Afghanistan." Marcus listed them off. "Last post was at the Pentagon." Cobb nodded respectfully. "I was shoulders aching from the angle. He was using the time to construct his report. Officer named Vance, badge number 4 Navy, 88 to 92. I'm sorry about this, sir. If this is a mistake, 922. Vehicle number 4-David-2. Time of arrest, 10:45 a.m. We'll sort it out." "It's not a mistake, Sergeant," Marcus said coldly. Violations, failure to verify ID, excessive force, unlawful arrest, deprivation of rights under color of law. It's a violation of my civil rights, and I want a lawyer." Vance returned, tossing the wallet onto silent treatment, huh? Vance scoffed. "That's fine. You'll talk when we book you. Probably the high counter. Here. Happy." Cobb opened the leather wallet. He pulled out a Washington State driver got warrants. "That's why you didn't want to show ID. I know the type." They pulled into his license. He looked at it. He looked closer. Then he pulled out a military retiree ID card. Then Sallyport of the precinct. The heavy metal doors rolled down behind them. Vance hauled Marcus out of the car, gripping. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. A temporary vehicle registration for a Ford F-150, registered to Marcus Thorne at 4102 Whispering Pines Lane. Cobb felt a cold knot form in his stomach, his bicep tightly parading him through the back hallways toward the booking desk. The station was busy. Officers. He looked up at Vance, who was leaning against the wall, checking his text messages, completely oblivious to the cliff where typing reports, Phones were ringing. But as Vance marched Marcus into the main processing area, the room quieted down. He had just walked off. "Vance," Cobb said, his voice quiet. "You might want to call." It wasn't just that Marcus was a large man. It was his presence, even in dirty gardening clothes, even in your union rep. "Why?" Vance laughed. "Because the squatter has a fake ID. Because handcuffs, he walked with a straight spine and a head held high. He didn't look like the usual Saturday morning." A new voice boomed from the hallway. Everyone froze. Walking into the booking room was Captain Frank Reynolds, the drunk or petty thief. The desk sergeant, a woman named O'Malley, who had been on the job for 20 captain, was a legend in the department, a man who rarely raised his voice because he never had to. He was holding years looked up from her computer. She saw Vance. She saw the suspect. And she frowned. What a tablet in his face was a mask of suppressed rage. "Because," Captain Reynolds continued walking straight up to Marcus, "do you have Vance?" O'Malley asked, her eyes lingering on Marcus. "Trespassing, resisting disorderly conduct," Vance announced loudly, dumping Marcus's wallet and keys, which he had finally grabbed from the table as an afterthought, onto, and looking at the handcuffs. "I just got a call from the city manager. Apparently his golf partner judged the counter. Caught him digging up a yard on Oakwood Drive. Refused to leave. Refused to ID Holloway. Mentioned that his new neighbor, a highly decorated Air Force colonel, was just dragged out of his driveway by one of my sergeants." Vance's smile vanished. "Captain, Reynolds ignored him. Marcus spoke up, his voice echoing in the tiled room. "I did not refuse to ID. I told the sergeant my ID was on the table. He refused to look at it. I am the owner of the property at 4, looked at Marcus. Colonel Thorne." "Yes, Captain." "I am mortified," Reynolds said. 40 Oakwood Drive." Vance rolled his eyes. "Yeah, and I'm the King of England." He pulled a key from his belt and personally unlocked the handcuffs. "I served under your brother, General Thorne, at He's a Squatter O'Malley. Process him." Sergeant O'Malley picked up the wallet Vance had thrown on the counter. She opened it. She pulled out the driver's license. She looked at the Fort Bragg in 95. "I know your family. I know your record." The cuffs clicked open. Marcus rubbed his photo. She looked at Marcus. Then she pulled out another card tucked behind the license. A military retiree, ID rank wrists. Deep red grooves were etched into his dark skin. "Captain Reynolds," Marcus said, keeping his tone formal, Colonel. Her eyes widened. She looked at Vance, then back at the card. "Vance, did you run? Your sergeant here refused to look at the deed to my house. He refused to look at my keys. He ran this ID. I didn't need to run it. It's probably fake." Vance dismissed. "Just book-ched my shoulder, which has been surgically reconstructed, and he arrested me in front of my neighbors because he couldn't believe a hymn." "Sergeant O'Malley," Marcus said softly, "please look at the back of that ID card. Scan the barcode if you need to, and I would suggest you call your watch commander immediately." O'Malley wasn't stupid. Black man could afford a home in Whispering Pines. The room was dead silent. The rookie at the water cooler had stopped drinking. The dispatchers had stopped typing. Reynolds turned to Vance. The look on the captain's face was terrifying. She felt the weight of the card. She saw the holographic seal. She looked at the suspect who stood. It wasn't anger, it was disgust. "Is this true, Sergeant? Did you refuse to verify residency with the discipline of a soldier at attention?" "Uncuff him," O'Malley said, her voice dropping. He was resisting, sir. He wouldn't get on the ground. I had to secure the scene for." "What?" Vance blinked. "No way. He's dangerous." "I said uncuff him, Vance, officer safety." Vance was stammering now, the sweat starting to bead on his upper lip. "He fit the description," O'Malley snapped, standing up. "Right now?" Before Vance could argue the door to the inner, the caller said, I don't give a damn what the caller said. Reynolds roared, the sound echoing off offices swung open. Captain Reynolds walked into the booking area holding the concrete walls. You are a supervisor. Your job is to investigate. You mean to tell me you dragged a man off a mug of coffee looking for a file? He was 60 years old, a Vietnam-era veteran who has owned property without checking a single document. You trespassed on his land to arrest him for trespassing. Ran his precinct with old-school rules. Respect the community, respect the badge, and don't make him look bad. I thought... You didn't think, Marcus interjected. You assumed. You saw. He stopped mid-stride when he saw the scene. Vance red-faced and arguing. O'Malley pale and holding color, and you stopped thinking. Badge and gun, Reynolds said, holding out his hand. Sir, an ID card. And a tall black man in handcuffs standing by the bench. Reynolds narrowed his eyes. He knew Vance blinked as if he hadn't heard. Badge and gun, now. You are on administrative leave pending in that posture. He knew that face. Marcus, Reynolds said, his voice disbelief. Marcus Thorne turned his head slowly. Immediate internal affairs investigation. Get out of my station. Vance's hands were shaking as he unbuckled his gun belt. The weight of the weapon, the symbol of his power, was heavy in his hands. He placed it on the counter. A small, tired smile touched his lips. Hello, Jim. It's been a while. The room went death. Then he unpinned the silver badge from his chest. He looked at it for a moment, a piece of metal Healy silent. Vance looked between his captain and the prisoner. Captain, you know this guy. Captain Reynolds didn't answer Vance. He walked straight up to Marcus, his face turning a shade of purple that terrified everyone had polished every morning before handing it over. He looked at Marcus, trying to find some defiance, but all he found in the room. Vance, take those cuffs off. Immediately. Sir, he was trespassing on Oakwood was his own reflection in the eyes of a man he couldn't break. You can't do this, Vance whispered. I followed protocol. You broke the law, Marcus said. And now I'm going to He bought the damn house on Oakwood. Reynolds roared, slamming his coffee mug down on the counter. So break you. Should police departments be required to release body cam footage within 24 hours of a disputed arrest? Let hard coffee splashed over the files. I was at his retirement ceremony last year. This man is a decorated Air Force colonel. Me know what you think. The fallout was swift, but it wasn't quiet. Marcus Thorne didn't just, he is a national hero, and you have him in cuffs for gardening. Vance's hands shook. Go home and tend to his garden. He went to war. He hired the best civil rights attorney in the state, a woman named, as he reached for his key. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the gut. The confidence, the arrogance, the narrative, it all shattered. He clicked the cuffs open. Marcus brought his hands forward, rubbing his wrists. Elena Ross, who had a reputation for eating city attorneys for breakfast. They didn't just sue the city. They launched deep red welts circled his dark skin. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He simply looked at Vance, a multimedia offensive. The security footage from Marcus's ring camera showing him calmly drinking tea while Vance screamed and escalated with an expression of profound pity. Captain, Marcus said, his voice steady. This officer refused to verify my identity was released to the press. The video went viral within hours. Millions of views. The image of the dignified veteran. He refused to look at the property deed. He used excessive force on a compliant subject. He entered my property without a warrant. Being manhandled by the screaming sergeant became the front-page picture of every major newspaper. Then came the audio of, and he did it all because a neighbor didn't like the way I looked. Reynolds turned to Vance. The Brenda Miller's 911 call. He has a weapon. A machete. The contrast between her captain's voice was dangerously low. Is this true? I had a credible call, sir. Hysterical lies, and the video of Marcus holding a gardening trowel was damning. The internet detectives found her in hours. Brenda, Vance stammered, stepping back. He wouldn't get on the ground. I had to secure the scene. You arrested a man on his own front porch, Reynolds said, stepping into Vance's space. You Didden Miller, who had prized her reputation in the neighborhood above all else, became a pariah. Her employer a high-ended investigate. You profiled. You assumed. And now you've dragged this department into a nightmare. Real estate firm fired her publicly to distance themselves from the backlash. She had wanted to protect her neighborhood's image. I want the body camera footage secured, Marcus said. I want the dispatch logs, and I want the 911 recording. Instead, she had become the face of its bigotry. But the real investigation was into Sergeant Vance. When Internal Affairs pulled his file, really pulled it, not just the cursory glance his supervisors had given it before they found a pattern. I'm not letting this go, Jim. Not this time. Reynolds nodded, looking defeated. You'll get everything, Marcus. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I don't want 12 complaints in 4 years. Harassment, profiling, excessive force. In every case, the victim was black, an apology, Marcus said, picking up his wallet and sliding his ID back inside. I want his badge. The fallout was swift, brutal, and public. Within 48 hours, his aggression, and in every case, the department had let him slide because his arrest numbers were high. This time, there was no sliding. Captain Reynolds made sure of that. He testified against his own officer. He called Vance's actions. The body camera footage was released. It was damning. The video showed Marcus calmly sipping lemonade. It showed him pointing to hiss a disgrace to the badge. The city attorneys took one look at the evidence, the medical reports detailing the re-injury to Marcus YD. It showed Vance screaming, escalating, and finally attacking a man who was offering no resistance. The video went viral as shoulder and the public opinion polls, and they waved the white flag. They didn't want a trial. They didn't, but not just as a fleeting internet moment. It became a leading story on every major news network. The image of a blacked want Marcus Thorne on the stand in a dress uniform telling a jury how he defended his country only to be assaulted by the people he fought to protect. The settlement was historic. $8 million. It was one of the largest payouts military officer who had served his country for 30 years. Being manhandled like a criminal in his own garden struck a nerve for a wrongful arrest in the state's history. But for Marcus, it wasn't about the money. He donated half of it to a legal defense fund for veterans who had been mistreated by police. Vance was not across the political spectrum. If it can happen to a colonel, the pundits asked, what happens to a just fired? He was decertified. His name was added to the National Registry, ensuring he could never work as a police officer teenager. What happens to a teacher? What happens to you? Marcus hired a legal team that specialized in civil rights violations, again not in the next town, not in the next state. He lost his pension. He lost his career. They didn't just sue the city. They went after the systemic failure that allowed Vance to remain on the force last seen working security at a warehouse, checking IDs, a job where he had no gun, no badge, and no power, despite 6 prior complaints. They subpoenaed Vance's entire disciplinary history. They found a pattern of stops involving minority men in 6 months later. Whispering Pines Lane was quiet again. Marcus Thorne was back in his front yard. The affluent neighborhood's harassment disguised as policing. Then came the audio of Brenda Miller's 911 call. Flower beds were finished, now blooming with hydrangeas and rhododendrons. The mulch was fresh. The retaining wall was repaired. It was played on the evening news. Her hysterical lying voice claiming Marcus was screaming and threatening was. He wasn't wearing his work clothes today. He was wearing a simple polo shirt and jeans, sitting on his porch drinking coffee. A patrol car drove slowly past the house. It wasn't Vance. It was a young juxtaposed with the silent security camera footage from Marcus's porch showing him quietly pruning flowers. The contrast was undeniable. Officer, a rookie. As the car passed, the officer slowed down, looked at Marcus, and gave a respectful nod. Brenda was exposed not as a concerned neighbor, but as a weaponizer of police fear. The consequences for Brenda were, Marcus didn't smile, but he nodded back. He looked over at the neighbor's house, Brenda's social and immediate. She was removed from the neighborhood association board. Her face became synonymous with the Karen phenomenon. She's house. There was a "for sale" sign in the yard. She had moved out 2 weeks ago, unable to put her house on the market a month later, unable to bear the silent glares of the neighbors who now knew exactly who she was. But the real focus remained on Sergeant Vance and the department. The internal affairs investigation was concluded, handle the stares of the neighbors who now knew exactly who she was. The neighborhood had changed not because of the new homeowner in record time. The chief of police, facing immense pressure from the mayor and the public, didn't try to, but because the truth had been forced into the light. Marcus took a sip of his coffee. He listened to the wind protect Vance. The findings were clear: gross misconduct, failure to follow procedure, violation of civil rights, false arrest in the Pines. It was peaceful, finally. But as he sat there, he knew that the peace was fragile. Vance was called into a hearing. He tried to argue that he was following training to control the scene. They knew that the only reason he was sitting there and not in a jail cell or a hospital bed was because he had the rank review board didn't buy it. He was stripped of his badge. He was fired. But Marcus's lawyers, the resources, and the discipline to survive the encounter. He thought about the men who didn't have cameras. Didn't stop there. They petitioned the state licensing board, and 3 months later, Kyle Vance was permanently decertified. The men who didn't have colonels for brothers. The men who flinched when they were screamed at. He could never work as a police officer in the state again. The lawsuit dragged on for 6 months, but the city knew owned the property. He had the deed. He had the keys. But in the eyes of a system built on suspicion, they couldn't win. They settled. The settlement was he had to buy his freedom over again every single day. Justice had been served, yes. But justice finalized on a Tuesday afternoon $8.2 million. It was one of the largest payouts for a wrongful arrest and shouldn't require a viral video and an $8 million lawsuit. It should be the default setting. It should be the city's history. But for Marcus Thorne, the money was secondary. He donated half of it immediately to illegal The Air We Breathe. What would you have done in Marcus's shoes? Would you have kept your cool or defense fund for veterans who had been wrongfully incarcerated? The other half he put into a trust for his grandchildren. The day that would you have fought back? And do you think the settlement was enough to pay for the humiliation of being handcuffed in your own home? Check cleared, Marcus was back in his garden. It was autumn now. The hydrangeas were fading, replaced by the... If this story moved you, if it made you think about who belongs, and who we assume doesn't deep reds and oranges of fall mums. The air was crisp. The neighborhood was quiet. Marcus knelt in the soil. Please leave a like and share this video. These stories are happening every day in every city, and we need to his hands working the earth. He loved gardening because it was honest. You reap what you sow. If you care, keep telling them until we don't have to anymore. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there. The end. Something it grows. If you poison it, it dies. There is no lying to the soil. He heard a car slow.
This concludes our analysis. For ongoing access to verified footage, please like and subscribe. Thank you for following Bodycam Incident Reports.